You're listening to the My Simplified Life podcast, and this is episode number 62. Welcome to the My Simplified Life podcast, a place where you will learn that your past and even your present don't define your future. Regardless of what stage of life you're in, I want you to feel inspired and encouraged to pursue your dreams, simplify your life, and start taking action today. I'm your host, Michelle Glogovac, and I'm excited to share my stories and life lessons with you while taking you on my own journey. This is My Simplified Life. Hey friends, welcome to another episode. I'm your host, Michelle Glogovac. This month, I am working specifically on my goals and my content. I'm actually creating podcast episodes through the end of January and working towards creating content for my emails and social media to get ahead. This can be tough because oftentimes we, or I should say I, can get stuck on what to write, which is what brings me to today's guest, Brenna McGowan, who is literally copywriter extraordinaire. I say that because I really and truly love reading Brenna's emails when they come in, and I want to reply to all of them. When was the last time you could say that about an email list you subscribe to? Brenna was kind enough to say yes when I asked her to come on today and talk about what it takes to create an engaging social media caption. And spoiler alert, this carries over to your emails as well. It's a total double whammy of info and knowledge that you're about to receive. Grab your pen and paper to take notes because this is an episode you don't want to miss. Hi, Brenna.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Oh, I'm so excited to chat with you. We're online buddies and email friends, but it's so rare to, in this day and age to get to actually talk to each other.
I know. Well, I don't know how it's so busy when I'm home all the time, but I feel like I've been busier than ever over this last year.
I totally hear you. For those who don't know you, can you please introduce yourself?
Yes. My name is Brenna McGowan. I am a copywriter who specializes in email, and I have a bit of a content background. So I also do a lot of content strategy for clients.
But you didn't always do that, right? I mean, we've noticed, everybody, that we have a lot in common, a lot of parallels in how we've gotten to where we are and even where we are and moving forward, but in different industries. What was your journey like before becoming an entrepreneur?
Well, I am not a young entrepreneur. I'm 43. So when people ask this question, I'm always like, gosh, which story should I tell? Because I feel like so much of our cumulative life or my cumulative life, has made up who I am. But the Cliff Notes version is when my youngest went to preschool, about 2011 or so, I started helping, I was a stay-at-home mom for years. I was very blessed that my husband had a business, but my primary, job, if you will, was to take care of the kids. And back in 2011 or so, my daughter went to preschool. And so I had a few hours where I could do some work. And so I started picking up some odd jobs doing social media and blogging. I was doing some email marketing, just kind of whatever landed on my lap that I could do from home. I did, if I had a computer and I could do it from home, I was writing some articles, doing proofreading, just a little bit of everything. And then about 2017 or so, one of the jobs at the time I was working for that was my primary source of income, which I had grown to like to have, little, I guess you could say, pocket money for our family. They actually had cut way back on my hours. And at the same time, I had a friend who was starting an esthetician business. I always joke because of how vain I was. I wanted eyelashes. I wanted fake eyelashes. And so I said, hey, why don't I help you with, some of your social media, email marketing, and, you can give me fabulous eyelashes. So I did this. And when I started doing this for her, people would start commenting how they, how much they liked her social media, blah, blah, blah. And at that time, I thought, well, maybe I should start a business doing this for other people. when I truly was not on social media for myself at all, personally. So I didn't have a ton of like personal social media knowledge, just what I was helping people with in marketing. And so I at that point, I had this idea to start a business, started a social media management business, not even knowing that's what you called it at the time. And that was, 2000, I think it was a 2017, April 2017. No, 2018. I always get confused. It wasn't terribly long ago. And what happened was I started this and I decided I hated doing social media management for other people. I mean, I didn't like it. By the end, not only was I doing social media management, I mean, I was doing Pinterest, I was doing Twitter, I was helping people with blogging, I was helping people with email marketing, I was helping them not only write their emails, but getting it onto their system. I was doing SEO. Like I started doing a little bit of everything. And I realized very quickly that, doing everything means you make like $2 an hour. So at the end of, yes, it was 2018, I started to think about which parts of my business I really loved. And at that point, I took a step back and I really loved email marketing. And more so than the email marketing, I really loved the copywriting behind the emails. So at that point, at the beginning of 2019, I started calling myself an email copywriter. That's what I changed my services to. The other thing too is along with the email copywriting, I noticed I was doing for myself a lot of Instagram and helping clients with Instagram, obviously, that there's a lot of parallels with copywriting for emails and for Instagram. So I definitely have used that and helped clients as well when it comes to, the different types of copy that we write. So, and basically that's how I've ended up here is lots of little twists and turns that brought me. But now that I'm in, now I'm submerged in the copywriting world and I've branched out a little bit more. And I don't just do email copy. I help a lot of people with website copy, sales copy. I help with any type of copy that sells or builds connection. And I love it. So I feel very blessed. I get to help amazing clients do this. And
well, you're really good at it.
Oh, thank you. I find it amazing how I kind of fell into it and it just happens to be what I really love. So I'm thankful.
Well, and it's funny, the social media part, that's how I started out too, after I was laid off in 2018 as well.
Oh,
and
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, I could not stand having my head down, engaging on other people's accounts. And it was so funny because in one day I would be a bartender, I'd be an event location, I would be a designer. I was all of these different people and I thought it was the weirdest thing in the world, but like you said, then you're not engaging on your own account. And I find that a lot of social media managers, they don't have great accounts because they're helping other people build theirs.
Right. And it's no joke. A shout out to all the social media managers out there too, because I don't think, even back then when I used to give out my prices and people be like, oh, I could do it myself, oh, it's not worth that kind of investment. To run a social media account well, especially Instagram, Twitter, obviously, because you have to post a bazillion times a day, but to get noticed. But people don't realize how much work it takes to, get great pictures together that coordinate, that are branded, to create copy that's engaging, to engage with other people. I mean, to do stories. There's so many components that go into running social media well that I think it's overlooked sometimes when people go to hire social media managers. They forget how much work it really is.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more because I do my own now and it's a ton of work, but that's why we repurpose things. And like you said, the emails. So I want to talk a little bit about your emails and then how you transfer that over to your social media captions, because I love your emails. They're engaging. I always reply to them. And I get a bunch of emails every day, right? We all do. We're all on different lists, but yours, there's a personal touch. They're funny. They tell the story. And I always want to reply back to you.
That's the best compliment any copywriter could ever get. So thank you very much.
So how do you do that? I think I sometimes feel stuck that I come from a corporate background. So my emails are more kind of stuffy, professional. And I'm working on this whole, write a story type of thing, get personal. But at the same time, I'm like, well, I'm just going to write the way I would normally write because that's who I am, just like I'm talking on my show the way I normally would talk. Is that how you get started?
Absolutely. I think that being conversational is, and this doesn't just go for email copy. I mean, this goes down from your email copy to your social media copy, down to your website copy. I feel like a lot of people, website copy, this gets overlooked a bunch. Sales page copy, being yourself and being conversational is, paramount to creating know, like, and trust. And so but however, I also think people are like, okay, I'm myself, but how do I put that into an email? And how do I put it into an email someone wants to open and someone wants to read? So, we could go a few steps deeper if you want and kind of like look at what are and how do you figure out those kind of stories that people, and the truth of the matter is that I always say that you can write an email about any story, anything that's going on with your life. However, that sometimes is almost too broad, right? Like here, you're not sure what you should talk about. And now I just given you license to talk about anything that you want in any story you want. And so I try and find a middle ground here that kind of connects those 2 points, because I think people get stuck with not knowing what to say, or, okay, now you're telling me I can talk about any story, but how does this relate to my client? Or how does this relate to someone who's actually reading? So the first thing, like you said, is you definitely want to be conversational in any of your copy. The second thing that we want to be, and this is something that I've noticed lately, as I kind of analyze other people's email or writing or clients that come to me who need help, I see a lot of stories that don't tell the story. And so I actually mentioned this on a live I did, I think it was, 2 days ago, was that people tell the story like, it's December and it's really busy. And don't you realize how busy it is too? Well, since you're so busy, let me help you with something. Like they tell these very generic stories. The way that people begin that know, like, and trust, the way that people want to open your emails is that you start really talking about a lot of specifics in your email. So what I mean by specifics is the generic story of, isn't it so busy this month since it's December? Like we talk about why we're busy. So this way I would pick a story here is like, okay, I'm so busy. Now what am I busy doing? I'm busy running my kids around. Now I got to go and, find Christmas presents. And, now I got to do it during a pandemic. I could start talking about all the things that I need to do in a very specific manner, so that's how we kind of build connection. It was funny. When I did that live the other day, Laura Belgray with Talking Shrimp, who's one of my mentors and who I just adore, she said that the more universal or the more specific we are, the more universal we are. And she said that wasn't her quote, that she had heard it somewhere else. But I was like, oh my gosh, I need to go write that down. That's so good. That sometimes we think that, with our specifics that people aren't going to, they're not going to relate to us, right? But the weird thing is the more specific we are when we start talking about these stories is we actually, even if I'm not going through the same thing you're going through today, I can relate to what you're going through. The human experience is very relatable. So that's definitely something to keep in mind, is we want to be conversational, but where a lot of people, where they don't go the next level deeper in their emails, captions, is really getting specific in their stories.
Can you dissect mine? No.
I'm happy to.
Hey, if you're reading you feel free to dissect. Part of my emails go out every week and they're based around my podcast episode. And in some cases they're not. And I'll put in the PS, the episode and what it's about if I have some other kind of story that I'm working on. But if you have, say, a podcast, what are your thoughts around making that your weekly email?
I think you could do it a couple of different ways. So it's funny enough. I sent an old client of mine who has a podcast recently. Once a month, I get a podcast recap from, I can't even think of her name. System Saved Me. I'm drawing a blank. Jordan Gill, I believe. So And lately I've been getting one where it's just a simple recap of the month, which I've actually been liking. There's not a lot of story there. But what I love about that is that like if I have forgotten over the month, or something that I want to look at, I think if I've been really busy and I haven't gotten to all the podcasts, I love having that like show up in my inbox, which is a recap, which reminds me to go back and look at or listen to those. I also definitely think that 100,000,000%, if you're having a weekly podcast, that you should be sending out some sort of like invitation for people to listen to you. I could myself, I don't know if I'm like everyone, I would say probably 70% of the episodes I listen to are people who remind me that they've sent this out. And this goes to not just for emails, or just not just if you have a podcast. If you've done a live on IGTV, if any of your content, remind your people that it's out there. We're all so busy. You're not, repurposing and using that is how you get more eyes on it. And it's actually how you solidify your message. So I love, Tarzan K talks about this in terms of personalities. What we don't want to do with any of our emails is get to the point where people that they get bored with what we're reading. So not only do I like to switch up with stories, I like to switch up at times with my emails. A difference of, going back to the Tarzan K thing is she talks about the 4 different personalities. She always talks about them in Friends characters, the disc personalities, which is kind of how I remember them. But, Red is the Monica. So Red is someone who's like, hey, I just want to do something really quick. So I would love to see, like, I would even think about splitting them up and seeing what works for your audience. Like, is it those like, okay, I'm telling you like a really quick, like 2-line story and then hitting you with the podcast episode, making it really quick, not a long, and it's easier on you to, you're not having to write this long story. Then you have your Phoebes. Those are the story emotional ones. I am like a Phoebe in my storytelling where I love a lot of stories. That's what I write a lot. So you could do something where you tell a story and then maybe you use your podcast as the PS or as a call to action. And when I'm saying this too, for listeners who don't have podcasts, this can go true for any content, any call to action. So we're inserting podcast here, but keep in mind that you can take this application and apply it to whatever you're promoting. The other thing, then you have like the Joeys or that's more of the jokester. I always call myself like a Joey Phoebe hybrid where I'm telling stories that are kind of funny, right? So you have that. And then you have the Rosses, and the Rosses are the people who just want the facts, right? They're not messing around. So I think you could intertwine some of those concepts even into your emails that go out. But I'm always a proponent of story and choosing stories. The way that you get stories that people want to read is, once again, going back to the conversation and the personable, and the specific, but then you're also using what I call a stellar segue. So you're using a story and you're figuring out some type of parallel, some type of metaphor, some type of analogy that you can tie it back over to your main call to action.
And then do you transfer all of what you're teaching us right now about emails over to social media captions as well?
Yes.
Is it almost one in the same?
Yes, exactly. And that's why I speak so much about like caption writing as well, because a lot of these concepts, everything that we've talked about, can be the same. You can have those short captions on social where it's just, I call it like a 1-2 punch, where you're hitting someone with a really quick, witty idea. You're not telling a long drawn story. People like, as much as I love stories, sometimes I love those like quick, funny things that just, or even if your personality is not funny, maybe it's something really deep or inspirational. So, that would be kind of your Monica, those quick ones. And I think your audience likes it too, when you have a mix of longer and shorter, like you keep them on their toes. Anything that you do all the time, over time, gets a little boring. So that's how I love to mix it up. And then you could go into, the storytelling one, the Phoebe one, where you're actually going through and telling some type of story, using a segue, and then using some, a call to action. The biggest difference between social media and email for most of the time is that I don't love a ton of selling in, and when I say social media, I'm primarily on Instagram. So I don't love a ton of selling in an Instagram post. I think there's a time and place for it. However, I think people sell too much in their posts at times, where the whole point of, social media is to be social. So where I might do a very direct call to action on an email because it makes sense. I think that you can sell, and this is kind of jumping around topics here. This is why it's so important to get people off of your social media channels and into your inbox, because then at that point, it's just, you can sell more directly, and it's easier to sell. On Instagram, you have to do the link in bio. They have to leave Instagram, where in an email, you're in their like special, their special inbox. It's kind of a one-on-one conversation, and then they're able just to click the link very easily to whatever you're offering. So those are the biggest differences, I would say. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
It's much more intimate email wise.
Exactly. And coincidentally, not only is it more intimate, but it's also a better selling ground. So it's a win-win to get people, into your email. So where I might sell in an email caption very directly, on a social media caption, or not, in an email, I might sell directly. On a social media caption, I'm going to be thinking of a way to get people to comment more than I'm going to say, because, I joke around about this, but, people are like, oh, I'm starting my group coaching program, sign up today. And then it's like crickets, right? So here you have one of the most important posts that you need is something selling, but yet people aren't engaging with your post. So the algorithm's not picking up because you're doing a very, I guess, for lack of better words, like selfish request on social media by no one knows how to comment. So I do on social media when it comes to selling, I do what's called a soft sell, which is I might mention what's going on. I might give the invitation and let people know, hey, this is what I'm up to. Go to the link in my bio to take care of it. But I'm always using a call to action that's very social and that's always thinking about the reader and wanting to know more about them.
I love that. And I'm glad that you brought up to mixing it up, because my captions are usually really long. I feel like I'm writing a mini blog post every time I go on Instagram. So that's why it takes me longer to schedule out my posts for a month. But to have even like a quote, because I do quotes as alternatives in some of my posts, to have that quote speak for itself and just mic drop.
Exactly.
There you go. I like that idea. And I appreciate that, because as I go into writing my December content, I'm going to use that, and I'm not going to make them all little mini series.
Well, and however, I don't have the statistics in front of me, but I think since like 2018, typically longer Instagram posts get more engagement. So it does make sense to do, like, some people will be like, oh, I hate longer Instagram posts. And it's like, no, if you go and look statistically, longer Instagram posts are going to get you the most engagement over time. And I really think it builds know, like, and trust. But on the flip side of that, I think this is where we kind of take all of these different principles and find out what works for us. And I think too, you have to look and see what works for, your reader. Look at what they are, what they're commenting on, what really resonates with them. But I do love having a mix. And some of my most commented Instagram posts have been those really short, pointed ones. I think on here, what to keep in mind is that a lot of people will do like an Instagram, let's say a quote card, and they do something that it doesn't, for lack of better words, it's a little generic, right? You want to think of things that are going to disrupt patterns. And that's part of writing Instagram captions really well, is that you want to disrupt the pattern that they're seeing everywhere else. So, talking about it in a different angle, if you're using a quote that's well known, how can you talk about it that's going to be a little bit different than others? If you are doing one of those mini blog posts, how can you have a headline that's going to stop someone's scroll? It's really thinking about with your copy, what is something that's going to make someone stop to scroll? What's going to make them curious? What's going to make them think that you really understand them? Those are the kind of things that was how your copy starts stopping people amongst a sea of scrolling.
What is your opinion on emojis because some of mine, I'll put them in as like the beginning of a paragraph. I did that today and I'm actually getting really good engagement because I was a little controversial. I was like, let's talk about some of the false sales claims that people have when it comes to podcasting. And then I addressed them and I was kind of hardcore, like, this is BS. And I had emojis for each new paragraph of, stop, money, all that stuff. But then I've seen some, and I find this annoying, where they put an emoji throughout the wording, like every third word is an emoji.
Yeah. Well, I think we have to go back to like some copy basics when we think about this. And so, in general, good, I always joke around too. It's like you can have great copy, but if it's not structured right, it doesn't matter if it becomes kind of, like you said, annoying to the person who's reading. So we want to make sure that our paragraphs, or not even paragraphs on Instagram, I don't recommend. I think every sentence should be a new line, maybe 2 sentences, maybe, depending on if it makes more sense. But really breaking up our paragraphs, making it easy to read. Are there parts where you can use emojis like you did from the way you're describing it? I haven't seen it today, but where it's kind of bringing attention to each line. So it's actually working as almost like a bullet. On Instagram, we have to be, with the way that we kind of structure our writing, we have to be a little bit more, unique or think about it differently. I love using, that for having emojis to help break things up, to draw attention to a line. Like you can't bold. I mean, some people use the text editors. I don't know why. This is my personal opinion. I don't like it when people use I think I like it better when they use emojis, or they're not going to some different program, making it bold and throwing it in. But that's just my personal opinion. I think you can do that, but wherever is an important line, something I want to draw attention to, I'm making sure I'm using an emoji, stars, using all caps, something that's going to draw the reader down the page. So for what you're saying, if someone's using emojis almost too much, it's going to be just as hard to read probably as if someone who has bunched all of their text together. If you're stopping the fluidity of their reading and their lines, then it makes it harder to read. This is another reason, whether it's email, captions, websites, that you want to use contractions, because you want it to, when you say do not, or there is, that's not how we talk. And so you're making the person stop for a minute because they're reading something that isn't the way that they would talk. So I always keep in mind too, is not only is your overall content super important, but you also want to keep you also want to think about how you're structuring your copy can be just as important on these captions.
You're a genius. I'm loving you even more than I loved you already. And that's like off the love meter.
I appreciate that. I'm glad I'm helping. So
you are. I'm sitting here going, yeah, okay, my December content might just be on fire, everybody. So be careful.
No, I'm glad. And I think we kind of like get into our heads about the content that we're writing, and going back to, okay, you can talk about any story, is that we're always thinking that we have to come up with something new, amazing, something no one's ever talked about before. And I can't tell you, it's my basic stories, that the things that are going on in my life, my email mentor, Chris Orzakowski, he always talked about, documenting over creating. And I don't think he came up with that idea, but he's the one that kind of helped me with this concept, which is you can talk about anything that's going on in your life. You can document what's going on behind the scenes, what you're helping with a client, what's going on with your podcasting. All of these things are things that can be talked about. And so instead of having to try and think, oh my gosh, I have to create so much content, I just kind of keep a running total of things that come up. I have an idea book that every time a client asks me a question, every time I come up with a brilliant idea, anything that kind of comes across my brain, a story that something that happened with my kids. Like, for example, this week, I'm going to talk about a story about, and this might be a great example too, to help people figure out how to use stories, is that my daughter this week was telling me how she hates school. On Sunday, it was Sunday before Thanksgiving. all of a sudden, she only goes to school 2 hours a day, but she did not want to go to school Monday and was having a lot of anxiety about it. And she just kept telling me, I hate school. I don't want to go to school. I hate school. And I stopped her and I was like, okay, I can't help you if you're not giving me specifics on why you hate school, right? Saying I hate school is not going to help me make things better for you. You need to go a step deeper and tell me. And so how I'm going to use that story in my email is this is what we do in our copy when we talk to our clients a lot of times is that we're giving people this really general overbroad idea and we're not going into those specifics like I talked about earlier. And the specifics is what sells. The specifics is what connects. And the specific is what your client can understand of how they can apply it to their life. So I'm always looking for these like parallels in life that kind of go on that I can use as examples because we're naturally people who just love stories. There's a reason why we're all on Netflix constantly watching the next thing that's coming up. So if you can make yourself the Netflix for your audience for whatever niche you're in, you're golden. Like if you can figure out how to tell these stories that really connect and get people to want to open them because they like you, they understand, they think it's funny, they connect with points of your life, all of a sudden, and truly, I'm not having to come up with a lot of content. I'm taking something that I would already teach and just figuring out how to apply a story to it.
I love that. And I keep a notes file in my phone for whenever I come up with, oh, that would be a good tip to talk about, on Instagram. So I do the same thing with my ideas. It just makes it easier when you're needing to pull content and you have this whole list of stuff that you've already created.
Absolutely. I've been using Trello a lot for this kind of stuff lately. I don't know why. I find it easier. Well, my phone it's just, I feel like I can't find anything on my phone. It needs an overhaul. I need to hire someone to help me clean up my phone. So I something with Trello lately has made me feel more organized. But I think whether you use your notes app, I use pen and paper a lot because I'm at my desk and I'm, old school. So a lot of times, or Trello's another idea, but wherever you have these thoughts coming to you, I think when you're thinking, I don't have stories, once you start thinking about things differently and looking for stories, they will start to jump out at you. When you start thinking about some of these core feelings, I go into figuring out what stories to talk about. I call it my forward backward method, which is I either have a story like I had with my daughter the other day where it just kind of jumped out at me where I think, okay, how can I take this story and apply it to my main call to action? And mostly on launches, especially, anytime I'm writing launch copy, I do what I call as my backward method, which is I figure out what my call to action is. So for example, let's say I'm selling something where I'm going to be saving time for a client. So I go and I look at the core objection, pain point, transformation myth, whatever it is that I need to make sure that I hit in the email. And I go, okay, my core idea here is that, I save people time. And then I figure out a story that kind of parallels. Okay, when was a time in my life that I didn't realize something was going to save me so much time? And then once I did it, I was amazed. And so all of a sudden I'm bringing life instead of just being like, hey, buy my stuff, I'll save you time. I'm kind of showing people and demonstrating in their minds through a story how I'm going to do this with a business principle.
That's genius. I'm going to use that for my next launch. Thank you.
Yeah, no, that's something like whether you want to sit down, in 2021, I'm hoping to be coming out with something that people can kind of teach them how to do this for themselves. But what will happen is it's like we get kind of stuck like, oh my gosh, what am I going to write about? Especially on a launch. And it's like, okay, go figure out what like those pain points, objections, the myths things that people believe about either your industry, your product, and go through and like write out all of these objections, pain points, and then, or the transformation, like where do they want to be? Where do they want to be in 6 months from now? And then once you have all of those, like the core story, the core feeling, the core emotion that we want them to feel, then all of a sudden now it's a lot easier to find stories that will match up. So we know how to write these emails.
Yeah. So, Brenna, can you share how people can find you? Because everyone's going to want to find you now for sure.
Yes. Well, I'm on Instagram at Brenna McGowan Co. Yeah, you can also find me on my website, BrennaMcGowan.co. I'm on Facebook, but just a tiny bit. And then if I can share something with your audience that I haven't told pretty much anyone yet, but it might be a good time, is that I'm actually going to be starting a Facebook group here in the next couple of weeks, where these are the kind of concepts, stories. I have a really, really special thing coming up at the beginning of January that's really going to help people. That's completely free. So if you do track me down, make sure that you follow me on Instagram, get onto my email list so that you're the first to know when I open this amazing new group up.
Yay. I can't wait to be part of it. And now that you've announced it to the world, you have to stick to it. That's how I do it.
I can't go back.
I'll do this a month out and I'll record an episode and go, well, I put it out there. So now I'm stuck.
Yes. Well, I've pinned myself in other ways that I won't talk about now, but yes, it's definitely happening. And I'm really excited about it. So
thank you so much for sharing so much of your knowledge and information. You schooled me, so I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. If I can also mention one other thing, when you go to my website or my Instagram, I have what's called my segue guide. And what I did, a lot of what I talked about stories here and how to find stories, I collected samples from top copywriters for captions and for emails, where I go through and break down exactly how to use these stories the way we talked about and apply these segues, these transition sentences over to your business. So it's been a really great guide for people who are looking like, okay, I know I want to tell these stories, but I'm not sure how to do this. I have a whole guide that breaks it all down.
Brilliant. You guys go follow Brenna today. Thank you again so much.
Thank you.
You guys, is your head spinning with all of this amazing information and content that Brenna just shared? I know mine is, and I'm so excited to get working more on my December and January content and to implement the lessons Brenna just shared. Remember that the key in all of this is to be yourself. Be yourself and share yourself, and that is how you will attract the right audience and clients. Until next week, my friends, stay safe, stay healthy, and stay happy.